How long did it take you to decide that this is not the job for you? Because I might work at, say, suppose a bank for a couple of years. I might like it, and then only after a few years I realize that it's not a place for me. But some other place I might work for a month. So, what is the key? What basically determines that I like this work and this is my chosen path?
Now, what you've asked is a very complex question, man, because it requires two or three things. First of all, it requires something in the short term. That is, whether I like the minute by minute, day by day work that I do. B, it requires something in the long term. It requires whether this work leads me to my purpose and goals in life. Does it give me meaning? So these are two different aspects, the short term and the long term. Both of these have to come together for you to be able to like the job. And to tell whether you like it or not can be very simple. In some cases, you can just do self-reflection. That is, you can look at what you liked when you were a child in school or after school in the extracurricular. Similarly, what you enjoyed in college or did not, both while studying and outside college. So what this does is, this kind of a self-reflective process is looking at yourself internally, quietly, alone. It's a kind of self-meditative practice. The reason being, every experience in life evokes an emotion. And because life is lived subjectively, that is, life is lived from inside out. That is, we don't live life by, for example, watching what others are doing only. We live life internally, and only we know and only we feel what we feel in a particular situation. And kind of the body also records it, the mind records that feeling. Therefore, what made us feel good could be a guide to what we are inspired by, what we find fulfilling, and what we like. So that's one process. The other is you can ask people. You can go out and ask people who know you well, what am I good at? What should I be doing? Okay. You can also go and interview people outside, etc. But I didn't do that part, going outside interviewing. I just searched on the net and saw what other people were doing. So some jobs I straight away eliminated through this process of meditation, self-meditation, and examining different jobs. Those you can straight away eliminate. In some cases, you may have to do an internship. That's a way of eliminating. In another way is maybe you will have to work at that job for a while to know whether you like it or not. Now, what does it mean to like and what does it mean to not like? Okay. So the concept of flow I would like to bring in here. Now, flow, if you see, most charts of it have a y and an x-axis. That is the horizontal and the vertical axis. Usually, on the vertical axis, you have skill levels, and on the horizontal axis, you have difficulty levels. That is, in simple language, if a task is too easy, then you get bored of it. Suppose I tell you to keep filling bottles with water, one after another, 100 bottles, it'll bore you because it's way below your skill level. But if I give you something very hard, if I tell you to solve, second degree differential equations and you have never done calculus, you will hate it. You will be frustrated. You will be depressed. So that is way above, the difficulty of that is way above your skill levels. Ideally, the skill level that the job demands should match the difficulty of the job. And then you feel engaged. That zone is called flow, when you're in that mental state where time loses meaning, where you lose consciousness of time, you're so engrossed in the project. Okay. So ideally, you should experience that in a job. But even if you don't experience that, that's fine. And I'll explain why. Because it can be developed slowly over time. Okay. It also depends on a second aspect, which I mentioned, the long term. That is, in the long term, the job should give you meaning. It should provide you with some purpose and fulfill, if not give you meaning, it should help to fulfill the purpose or meaning that you have worked out for your own self in life. That is, for most people, meaning and purpose comes either from their religion or comes from providing for their families. It can also be for the greater good of the world.
The most innate wants, or which is comes really from within. within. That's why these are really complex.
Exactly. That drive comes from deep within, and where it comes from, actually, nobody knows. Because it could come from your religion and upbringing. It could come from the fact that we have an evolutionary desire to provide for our families. It could also come from, it could only be just purely personal. That is, you want to achieve something, or you want to arrive somewhere and be recognized, because that's also a basic drive, as you rightly put it. The desire to arrive at some place is a basic drive of human beings.
Absolutely.
From evolutionary times, from hunter-gatherer times. Or it could even be, something which is outward focused. If you are a philosophical person, you may want to do something for the environment, of the world, greater good of the world, or for your community, for the greater good of your community, So it could even come from there. But whatever it is, it should provide you for a reason to get out of bed in the morning. It should provide you a reason to live. It should provide you also, this meaning should also provide you with certain purposes and goals in life. Now, when those purposes and goals are aligned with your job, then you can find a career. This is the key. Suppose you even enjoy something. You can work at it, but you find, funnily enough, scientific research shows that you will not be as happy in the long term as a person who has meaning. Now, there's now a lot of scientific research on this. Okay, and I'll provide in the video at the bottom in the description the relevant articles from the Atlantic, etc. There are books on it as well that look, meaning is more valuable than happiness, immediate happiness. Why? Because happiness is a temporary sensation, a fleeting sensation. You can even get it from a drug, You just take some drug or intravenously inject yourself with something, and you can temporarily be in ecstasy. But meaning provides you with much longer term happiness. Aristotle distinguishes these in two ways. Aristotle says, look, there are two kinds of happiness. One is hedonistic, that is purely pleasure driven. The other is eudaimonic happiness, that is a much deeper feeling of fulfillment, human flourishing, and growth. The difference between happiness and meaning has been researched quite a bit now by psychologists. And they're finding that happiness, or happy people rather, are largely selfish. That is, this comes from our evolutionary history. Happiness just meant satiation of our hunger, of our desires. So happy people, they have found, are people who face few obstacles in life, who had enough money to get what they want in life, live comfortably, but they are not other focused at all. They are only self focused. And this problem will arise also if your meaning is largely derived only from yourself. Because then the problem is that if it comes only from yourself, as Carl Jung said, that is a recipe for unhappiness. Meaning largely has to be other derived, that is derived from others, according to many people, such as Carl Jung, etc. And in fact, if you have a purpose, as Nietzsche said, if you have a why, you can endure anyhow. If you have a reason, if you have a why, you can endure anything. You can do anything because you have a purpose, you have a goal of it. So, I mean, look at the example of this psychologist, a year called Bloom. He's done a lot of research on parents, and the self-reported happiness of parents is not high. Most parents are not very happy in the moment when they're raising small children. But when you ask them later in life, or even then, does your life have meaning, or did your life have meaning? They always report higher happiness and higher meaning than single like individuals or childless individuals.
More complete, more alive, who's more complete, busy. That's what you mean by rest.
So they feel that their life has a purpose. It is to sustain this small life, this child, Then similarly, when they ask them later, and the children are grown up also, they remember that time as actually a happy time. Whereas in that time, if you ask them when the children were small, they would say, I'm not very happy. But my life is meaningful. And so what happens is, when you look at their overall life happiness over the long term, this is self-reported happiness in large data sets. They report higher meaningfulness and higher happiness overall than people who are generally led a hedonistic life, So
it's counterintuitive actually to think about, happiness. Everybody's running towards happiness, but then you realize in the short term, you don't search for happiness.
Exactly. So exactly, and the philosophers have put it this way, and so are now these researchers, that happiness is not something to be pursued. Happiness is something that ensues. That is, once you start doing something, happiness follows. If you start chasing happiness, you won't find it. You have to let happiness chase you. So, like that dude 2,400 years ago said, Aristotle, I'm referring. There are two kinds of happiness, he said. One is hedonistic and one is eudaimonistic.